It's this
Yeah.
Twitter account, I guess, and they go around looking for good backgrounds or bad backgrounds that people do on like interviews on CNN and stuff like that. And they somebody had said, "Why aren't you focusing on houses of worship that are doing things virtually?" And I guess they're Vancouver based, one of the people, and so they put us up, and they gave us a 10 out of 10.
No kidding.
Yeah, they say we don't normally rate virtual backgrounds, but Temple Shalom in Vancouver is doing it all right. Perfect symmetry
Nice.
and COVID safe.
Wow. Good.
Yeah,
Thanks. That's another credit to you.
I took this picture that we're using as I was walking out the building right after Purim, or
Wow.
whatever the day or two was when we knew we were not coming back for services. I just snapped it on my iPhone. Like I took a half a dozen pictures and that was it. And this is the one we've been
I'm
using.
so grateful. The picture of the Torahs and seeing
Yeah,
those Torahs every Shabbat, I am always grateful that you took that picture.
thank you. Thank
Yeah, thank you.
you. Yeah, it's worked pretty well.
Yeah, it would have been really hard not to see at least a little bit of our
Yeah,
sanctuary and our Torahs.
yeah. Okay, 5:30. A few people online. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this early service. No particular reason, not a special day for most of the world. But my guess is if your day was like ours, most of us spent it at home, either picking over leftover Chinese food or just lounging around, or a little bit of both. And we thought that it gets dark so early, we'd do a 5:30 service, and that way, if you want to stream Wonder Woman 1984 or any of the other shows that are out there, you still can tonight. We watched The Prom last night on Netflix. It was fantastic. It's really campy musical about inclusivity with James Corden and what was her name? What's the I forget her name.
Meryl
Oh,
Streep.
Meryl Streep.
Oh,
It was terrific. It was we were all kind of crying. It was really great. So I gotta say, not getting crushed with people on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day at a movie theater. It used to be when I was growing up, you went to the movie theater, and it was just the Jewish community. I remember one year Yentl came out on Christmas Day, and my rabbi growing up, Rabbi Gerald Reiskin Shalom, literally stood up in front of the entire movie theater because it was pretty much our entire congregation, and sort of welcomed everybody and did a little drosh and then enjoy the show because everybody there was Jewish. Now the secret's out. Just like we were saying before, the Chinese restaurant last night had an hour and a half wait for our pickup. The movie theaters last year were crushed with people, so maybe it's better we stay home.
yeah.
It worked well. Anyhow, glad that you could join us. This will be a quick service tonight, an opportunity for those that have come to say Kaddish or Misha Berach to do that, and of course to have our Shabbat together. So let's start page 128.
הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב ומה נעים, שבת אחים גם יחד. הנה מה טוב, שבת אחים גם יחד.
Let's continue page 131. Shirul Adonai Shir Chadash. We sing unto God a new song.
שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, מסרו מיום ליום ישועתו, ספרו בגויים כבודו, בכל העמים נפלאותיו, כי גדול אדוני לעולם מאוד, נורא הוא על כל אלוהים, איי איי איי, ידעי 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 Yai dai dai dai. Yai dai yai dai dai.
We'll continue with Shalom Aleichem, page 142.
Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Malach, Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Malach, Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruchuni leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Malach, Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem leShalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Malach, Malachei HaMelachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
Lecha Dodi, page 138.
Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Chamor v'zachor b'dibor echad Hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad Ushmo echad l'shemo tiferet L'tehila Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha Ki mekor haberacha mirosh mikedem Nesucha sof maseh b'machshavat echila Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Mikdash melech ir melucha Kumiti mitoch hafecha Rav lach shevet be'ameka bacha Uyachamol alaychem la Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Hitoreri Kiva orech Kumi ori Uri Shir daberi Kavod Adonai Alayich nigla Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla Boi v'shalom teret bala Kam b'simcha otahala Toch emunei am segula Boi chala Lecha Dodi likrat kala Penei Shabbat nekabla.
If you're following along, you can do so in our prayer book on page 263 for Chatzi Kaddish will rise. And if you'd like to follow along in the prayer book, you don't have one, there's one located at templeshalom.ca/video, a link just below the screen. Page 268, Chatzi Kaddish.
Yitkada v'yitkada shemei rabba Velma divrachu teviamlich malchute B'chayechon of yomechon Uv'chayedachol beit Yisrael Bagala Uv'izman kariv V'himeru amen Yeheshmei rabba mevarach Le'olam olam me'omaya Yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitba'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitala Shemei Kudashah Barichu Leila min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata Tamiram be'alma ve'imeru Amen.
We'll turn to page 264 and rise, if you're able to, for the Baruch Hu.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvorach Leolam Vaed.
Can be seated. We'll continue page 265, a prayer for evening, which seems to come earlier and earlier, although I know now with the winter solstice it's actually starting to get later and later. Mariv Aravim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim. B'chochma poteach sha'arim u'bitvona meshana itim. U'machalif et hazmanim u'mesader et ha'kochavim. B'mishrotehem barakia kirtzono. Borei yom v'layla golel or mipnei choshech v'choshech mipnei or. U'ma'avir yom u'mevi layla u'mabdil bein yom u'bein layla. Adonai tzivaot shemo. El chai v'kayam. Tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. If you stood, and I can't see if you have, please be seated. Page 266, Ahavat Olam.
Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amchavta Torah mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shochbeinu u'vkumeinu Nasiach b'chokecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha ובמצוותיך לעולם לעולם ועד כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו ובהם נהגה יומם בלילה באהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו Israel, Ohev Amo, Israel. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Leolam Vaed.
We'll continue.
Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha u'v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi metzavecha hayom alavavecha ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך וקשרתם להוד על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen.
We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all. Yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound. Before our eyes there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness. There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul. When will redemption come? When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves. Long ago, we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High. We learned then God's presence redeems time and event. And so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom. Mi Chamocha, page 270.
Mi chamocha beilim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele, malchotecha rauvanecha, bokei hayam livnei Moshe Miriam, Zeni Anu Ve'amru, Adonai Yimloch, Adonai Yimloch, Le'olam Va'ed. V'ne'emar kifed Adonai et Yaakov, V'gala miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael.
Hashkivenu is on page 271, a prayer for protection and safety at evening.
Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, l'shalom. V'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha, ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Amen.
We continue page 272, Vishamru.
Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, ביני ובין בני ישראל, אותי לעולם. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashvi Shabbat vayinafash. Yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, Shabbat, yum bada bim bum bye, Shabbat, 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 Shalom.
Adonai Sefatai Tiftachu Fi Agidi Latecha. Eternal God, help us find the words that we might speak with you in prayer. If you're able to, please rise in your homes, page 274, the Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah, Hayel Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel chasadim tovim v'konei hakol, v'zocher chasdei avot v'imahot, u'mevi geula livnei v'neihem, leman shemo be'ahava, melech ozer Moshiach u'magen, Baruch atah Adonai, magen Avraham bezrat Sarah, atah gibor le'olam Adonai, Mechayim etim atah rav lehoshia, Mashiv haruach morid hagashem, Mechalkel chayim bechesed, Mechayim etim berachamim rabim, Somech noflim verofei cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayim emunato, Lishaynei hafar, Mi chamocha ba'al gevurot, umido melech memid umechayeh, umatzmiach Yeshua, v'ne'eman ha'talach hayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, mechayeh hametim. Ata kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, ukdoshim b'chayom yalucha salah, Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh.
Amen. You are holy, your name is holy, and all those who are holy shall praise your name forever and ever. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el ha'kadosh.
Amen.
We'll take a moment for our own silent prayer, our own meditations, and the words of our hearts. We'll continue page 282, Shalom Rav.
Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata melech Adon lecho Shalom. Ki ata melech Adon lecho Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. V'tov b'necha levarech et Amcha Yisrael b'chol leit v'chosha Bishlomecha. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Baruch atah Adonai Hamavarech et Amo Yisrael B'Shalom.
Cantor, I don't know if I ever told you this, but my earliest recollection of ever leading services was as a teenager when I was in BBYO in Mugwanago, Wisconsin. And I remember standing in a big cavernous gymnasium at our camp and singing Shalom Rav. That was my part in the service that I was leading. I was 14, 15 years old or something like that. And I remember being terrified in that moment, and so glad that you're singing it for us now.
I always appreciate it. Thank you.
We're going to turn to page 370, 371, as we offer a Misha Beirach, a prayer for healing, for those in our community who are sick and in need of healing. We think so much about those who are sick at this time, and those who are battling COVID, and those that are battling other illnesses and ailments in the midst of this, and the crush that is weighing down upon our healthcare system. That all that are sick might find healing, and that all that are bringing healing might find the courage, the strength, and the stamina to be those providers of health and healing. We ask God's blessing of healing on Dr. Dimitri Zanzoni, Lynn Szabo, Ted Cohn, Shana Stawicki, Jack Karp, Ralph Schulman, Tzvi Katz, Elizabeth Katz, Maylor Valance, Elliot Pohl, Sanford Cohen, Shinar Zalman Ben Meir Leib, Jean Angus, Sarah Chiachi, Mary Coheen, Kim Bennett, Sarah Bat Avraham Vasara, Igor Ilisov, Ed Ozer, David Shlomo Gorney, Ronnie Goldberg, Andrea Jarzybak, Maureen Newman, Neil Tapley, and Yana Timko. If there are others in need of this prayer for healing, I invite you to call out their names out loud, to type them even into the chat below this screen, that we might add them to our prayers for healing as we join together with our cantor, page 371, Misha Beirach, a prayer for healing.
Misha Beirach Avotenu Makor HaBracha Leimotenu bless the ones before us. Help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishebeirach imotenu Makor habracha le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
Thank you, Cantor. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. No sermon tonight. It's a short service. There will be a sermon tomorrow morning. As I indicated last week, we're going to continue our look at the Jewish ethics of vaccines. Last week, we talked about, are Jews required by Jewish law to be vaccinated? The answer is yes. In fact, not only required to be vaccinated, we're required to advocate that others be vaccinated as well. If you want to understand the reasoning behind that, the sermon is available on our YouTube channel. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about the efficacy of vaccine distribution and the Jewish values and ethical issues involved in that distribution process. And if you had a chance, the New York Times had a fascinating article with 6 epidemiologists about that very subject, not from a Jewish perspective, but a fascinating article this morning about it that helped to inform the teaching that I hope to do tomorrow with you. But I do want to share a couple of quick announcements. So the first announcement is there's no sermon, but the second announcement is there are announcements. So let me just share briefly a couple of things. First, as mentioned, tomorrow morning services are at 10 a.m. We're pretty quiet for the next 10 days or so between now and the new year. As I know many, although we're not going anywhere, we're all kind of home. I'll be taking next week off. Rabbi Brown is off this week. But when we come back in January, join us on Wednesday, January 6th at noon for the first in a 3-part series with Mike Hollander. Mike, you might know, grew up here in Vancouver, is an incredible educator and guide in Israel, and has spoken to our congregation before. We're going to do the first of a 3-part series. This will be a virtual tour of Machane Yehuda. In Israel, they are not quite on lockdown, so Mike is actually able to go around and to do some of these things. So he's going to take us through Machane Yehuda. We're going to talk about Israel in COVID and also talk about the Shuk and the role that it plays in Jerusalem life and in Jewish life. So join us for that. That's via Zoom, so it'll be participatory. We have some games going on Tuesday the 29th at 5 o'clock for our grades 4 through 7. And then just some other community activities. Our sisterhood's got stuff going on the end of January, middle of January. The men's club has a session with Professor Kurt Hubner and other things going on at the shul. So I hope that you'll join us for those activities and events. And then lastly, I'm not giving a sermon. I did want to just do one quick teaching because otherwise all I'm doing is announcing page numbers tonight. So as Cantor Tausig and I were talking beforehand, we were joking about Jews and Chinese food, which is a common conversation this time of year in the Jewish community. And it's taken on really very much of a folklore kind of mode within Jewish culture and history. So the question has always come up, why do Jews eat Chinese food on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day? And actually, there's been a lot of scholarship. There's been documentaries, there's been news reports, there's even been articles written about this. And you may know these answers, but sociologically, they're actually quite interesting as they speak to at least the American Jewish immigration from Eastern Europe in the beginning of the 20th century. So there's 3 primary reasons. In fact, the comedy special that we were just listening to with my family that we had promoted about Christmas Eve for the Jews, the rabbi who spoke during that comedy festival because only the Jews would have a rabbi speak during a comedy festival, referenced these as well. He did it as a joke, but in truth, I attended a seminar once at a conference where a Jewish historian talked about these three underlying principles of why Jews eat Chinese food as well. So with enough buildup, there's really three reasons. One is that when Jews were immigrating to largely the East Coast of the United States, New York City primarily, there was a plethora of Chinese food available, and it was cheap. And as an immigrant class that did not come over with piles of cash, this was accessible for them. The second reason, and maybe this is really kind of part of the first, because there's really four reasons, is of course that Chinese restaurants were largely open on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Many Chinese at that point in the United States had not adopted Christianity as a religion and were still Buddhists and didn't observe Christmas at that time. The second reason, because I gave you two in the first, the second reason is that Jews are actually historically lactose intolerant, as half the dozen people or so, half the people in my family could tell you. So there's no dairy in Chinese food, and that made it a more palatable meal for the Jews. The third one, which I thought was most interesting, is if we think about the Eastern European migration from Eastern Europe to the United States, or to North America, let's say. We know Nova Scotia and all that as well. These were Jews that were leaving the shtetl and the rigidity of Jewish life. Largely, many were fleeing persecution or for their lives, or some, I should say, were fleeing persecution for their lives, but many were just trying to get out of the shtetl of Eastern Europe and all of its, very, very repressive expectations upon communal practice. So these were Jews that were not looking to be more Jewish necessarily when they came to the United States, but perhaps less. There is an old story that you could, and this is not true, of course, but that you could walk across the Atlantic Ocean on all the talesim and tefillin bags that had been thrown overboard from the ships as they made their way from Europe to the United States. That said, when Jews arrived in New York, though they had left the shtetl had not left them, and some customs would die hard or not at all. One of them was that a Jew would not eat a slice of ham, would not eat a pork chop. But if you cut it up into little pieces and you put, sweet and sour sauce on it and you wrap it in some noodles or something, well, then it suddenly becomes tofu. In truth, it was one way that Jews began to lose kashrut as it became more palatable and in that kind of conveyance of chopped up with sauce Chinese food. But there's another reason that I like very much, and with this I'll end, and that is, I think, more homileic than anything else, which is that Jews like sweet and sour sauce because our life and our celebrations and our tradition is very much the sweet and the sour. There is no sadness that we can't find joy, and sadly, there's no joy that we can't find sadness. And so we live in a world of sweet and sour. And while I'm sure this has no reason for why Jews eat Chinese food, it is, I think, poetic that we are a sweet and sour people, finding the sweet and the sour, the joys and the oys. And that is also at the core of many of the Chinese menu items. So there you have it. Not a particularly scholarly insight, perhaps, but just to further explain that now very prominent Jewish custom. Our service will continue, page 586. How was that? Can you tell us, did that work okay?
Perfect rush for the evening.
Okay. Now we're all hungry. So 586 will rise for Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגור עלינו כחומונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא, שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומושביה קרוב בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים, הוא אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפס ולטו, כך כתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום והשבות אל לבבך, Ki Adonai hu Elohim, Bashamayim mihimal, ve'aretz ve'aretz, mitachot einod, ve'nemar v'haya Adonai, lemelech al kol haaretz, bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad, Ushemo echad.
Our service continues now with Kaddish Tom, the mourner's Kaddish, as our thoughts turn to loved ones who are not with us, but whose memory very much is. As I've mentioned before, it is a particularly difficult time in our world and our existence when families separated by distances and by COVID cannot gather together, cannot be at the bedside of their loved ones as death approaches. We have many families that have gone through this recently in our congregation, and though this medium helps, it is not the same as being able to hold the hand of your parent and let them know what they meant to you and how you would love them and cherish their memory forever. So I encourage us all to think about the difficulty not only of losing a loved one, of the death of a friend, a parent, a spouse, a sibling, child, God forbid, but also the tremendous extra burden of not being able to mourn in the way that we have learned to mourn throughout our people's history. So our thoughts turn to those for whom have departed this earth, our loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. On this Shabbat, we recall those who died during this past week, these past 30 days, whose families are in the midst of Shiva and Shloshim. Sharon Pekarsky, Paul DeYoung, Alex Farhado, Catherine Levine Stensley, David Unterman, and those for whom the Yortzeit, the anniversary of the death of your loved one, is on this Shabbat: Audrey Arbor, Henry Berger, Sarah Kleiman, Werner Daltrip, Isidore Jacob Davis, Bertram Edwards, Dora Elson, Mickey Finkelstein, Harry Gold, Cassia Gold, Don Gordon, Peter Allen David James, Lester Kahn, Ralph Califf, Nathan Kaplan, Eugene Kenner, Ruth Toe Krieger, Jack Cusson, Blanca Lederer, Gertie Lerner, Bella Leventhal, Sam Martz, Minnie Menkes, David Moss, Elaine Mott, Cheryl Olma, Evelyn Ozer, Jack Raber, Justine Wolden Ratner, Carol Rabitzchek, Millie Rossoff, Lena Rubinson, Leslie Sally, Ethel Schatz, Judy Schulman, Florence Wilder, Henry Zimmerman, Morris Zeigelman. If there are others with names for Kaddish, loved ones that you are remembering, I invite you to call their names out loud or quietly in your hearts, or even to type them into the comment window below this video screen so that we might join you in remembering them for blessing. We turn in our prayer books now to page 598 as we rise for Kaddish Tom, the mourner's Kaddish. And if you'll give me just a moment, I will put the Kaddish up on the screen for you. 1 second here. Where'd it go? Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala uv'izman kariv v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam ulamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitroman v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei d'kudesha b'rechu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiron be'alma v'yimaru. Amen. Yehei shlama Rabbah min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimaru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'romav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'kol yoshvei tevel v'yimaru. Amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort the bereaved among us, and we say together, Amen. A reminder, services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., Torah study at 8:30 in the morning. Join us for that service, and then afterwards, stick around on Zoom for our virtual oneg, so we'll have a chance to kibitz and connect with each other. Cantor Tausik, any announcements or anything to share?
Yeah, just have a lovely low-key holiday time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Stay in, stay safe, and hopefully have a sweet and happy and healthy new year. A closing song.
Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Oseh shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom, everyone.